Okay, welcome to True House Stories. I am Lenny Fontana coming out of New York City, and the summer is wrapping up. It's going fast. It's been a rainy one. We've all been trying to deal with COVID and all that great stuff. Oh, God, great stuff. Not even great, but we're trying to turn lemons into lemonade. Let's put it like that. So, on that note, we will say, keep drinking lemonade, smile, because someone loves you. It's like Telly Savalas was saying, Kojak, God loves you. Anyway, we're going back in time, as I always love to do, revere to some of the best in our game. And when I say our game is because I started in his game. He's predecessor to even myself. He was around from when dinosaurs roamed. And I mean dinosaurs, music speaking, not dinosaurs from but dinosaurs in the sense of having to create things on the fly, come up with solutions, and make dreams possible with very archaic gear in a time that, today everything is one stroke away. You can Google it. In his day, it was like, we must build it, or I have to figure this thing out. Don't give me a moment. Like Bob Clearmountain would tell Tom Moulton, I can do it. I can make it. Don't worry. And probably Tom would leave the room, or any of those engineers would say, I don't know. We'll figure it out. But anyway, Bob can share that and give us his life. But we're going to turn shortly right now to Bob Blank, who's gone. I was going to say Bob Clearmountain. God forgive me. Bob Blank, they're both all legends, even Bob Blank, Bob Clearmountain, but Bob Blank is a huge legend in disco. Oh my God, disco R&B, this is the man. And I want to welcome to the stage, to the show, Mr. Bob Blank. I hope I covered as best as I could, Bob. Thank you so much. Welcome, Bob, all the way from Connecticut. He's here. He's with us. Bob, how are you doing, buddy? You okay?
I'm doing great. I live in Greenwich, Connecticut now. I have a tiny production studio, which has been pretty inactive. I know we're going to be talking about this stuff back here, which some people might know of, records and tape and everything, but I have a pretty a Pro Tools system, which I'm still using. But the way the world has been for the last 16, 17 months, I haven't really been in front of too many people. And I know this sounds crazy, but that's sort of the best part of the disco era, is we were all working with musicians and arrangers and singers, and we were all interacting, and it was all happening live. And like you said, when we would go in the studio, if you didn't like that guitar part, then we had to record it again. It wasn't like we'll just edit it and change all the notes. So it was a different time, but I personally think that they were really great times. But I'm great. Life is good.
Thank God you're still healthy, and you're with us strong and rolling along, right? That's all you can say. Like Now Rogers says, a good day above ground's a good day. Another day. It's true.
Yeah.
Okay, so as everybody knows, let's get right into it, because you got a story that goes for a full generation and probably longer than that. For some, it's a lot older than some of the people that watch the show. But we need to start with, how does music find the young Bob Blank, the kid? From there, you could take us, paint that story the way you know.
Well, this sounds crazy, but when I was a little kid, I had an uncle, and he would bring the kids things. And he lived in New Jersey, in Elizabeth, New Jersey. He'd bring us records. And while this guy who looks like this was there, my uncle owned a lot of black bars in the city of Elizabeth, New Jersey. The first records I heard were James Brown, B.B. King, these kind of early R&B things. And of course, I was exposed to everything else on the Ed Sullivan Show, all this, the pop music of the time. But I really was listening to all that. When I was a teenager, if you want to put up number 11, picture number 11. This is me on the left with Michael Altschuler in Michael's father's basement. And I think I'm 16 at the time. And as you can see, we're doing a recording session. And Michael's father was a promo person at Columbia Records. And we were very encouraged to do all this, to use his basement to make records. And this is where I started doing this, basically right to 2-track. Time moves on. I moved to is this too tedious, by the way, Lenny?
Not at all. You take it. I totally get it. And everyone who's here is soaking in like a sponge. Come on, everybody, get your pen and papers out. Write notes.
Okay. So anyway, there I am. Woodstock happens. I'm 18. I moved to the Southwest. And I start, at the time I was a guitarist, and I started playing in bands in the Southwest and performing. In backup, we backed up people like Bo Diddley, people who came through town. And I started understanding music. I produced a band out there called Fast Eddie, and we tried to make records. There's a picture. You'll find this pretty funny if you look at number 9. So this is me in 1970, ready to hit New York as a guitarist, and that's me.
Is that your Eric Clapton, Derek and the Dominoes look at the time? Cream.
Yeah. Hippies didn't really have much going style-wise, so this was me. So anyway, I moved to New York, and I'm living in the Kenmore Hotel, which was a flop house on 23rd Street, and walking around town with my guitar. And I got a job. My first professional job was a place called Sanders Recording Studio. Sanders Recording Studio was, if you remember New York from those days, 48th Street was called Music Row. We were across the street from Manny's. Upstairs and downstairs down the block was Sam Ash. All these music stores. And we had a little studio on the second floor, walk up. And I was the engineer. And in fact, that's where I met Richie Ash, who is now billionaire, I guess. But he had a band, and we all recorded and did all this stuff. So we were in Sanders Recording Studio, and I was working with people like Tiny Tim and artists like that. Make a long story short, there I am. I'm going, I can do this. I can do this. Finally, I get a job as a session player. I go in, it's for a commercial. So I walk in with my guitar, and this is relevant to the disco era. So I go in there, and I'm walking in. I got this. What can it be? It's 30 seconds or 60 seconds. It's only 12 bars. I sit down. I see music. Next to me is Eric Gale and another guitarist. Eric Gale is pretty well-known guitarist at the time. And I'm sitting there going, okay. All of a sudden, the conductor says, do it. Bam. Everybody's playing perfectly. It sounds amazing. I'm still trying to figure it out. I realized at that time, I have another path to follow. I wind up getting a job at a place called Delta Recording Studio, which at the time was an 8-track studio in the Palace Theater building. Palace Theater on 47th Street and Broadway. And Palace is still there. So the story accelerates from here. If you look at picture number 12. So this is me in the early 70s. I'm sitting at a little console, and I'm filling out an invoice, I guess. But another picture from that time. So let's see if I can show you.
Bob, can I stop you? Can you tell us which console that is that you're writing on? Is that MCI? Who is that console?
No, this is a company called Audio and Designs. And at the time this console was made, they were all custom. You want to hear the specs of the console? It had 8 outs, and there were, I think, 20 faders. different than the consoles that are made today, which are 1.5-inch wide faders. I'm sorry to get so technical, which if you put out your hands, you can, if you stretch out 10 fingers on your hand, you can reach a bunch of faders. This thing was a little too wide for that, and they soon abandoned this 2.5-inch spacing. Console is pretty rudimentary, but it was custom built for this studio. And there's another picture of me at that console, if you look at number 10.
Yes.
So this is me in a promo that was done. Well, obviously, I'm not standing with a bank of tape machines behind me, but the picture on the left is me at this console. And like I said, it was pretty rudimentary. You know, if you wanted to move 5 things at once, you placed your hands over it. We used to have a trick where if we had 3 or 4 tracks to move, we'd tape a pencil to them so we could move them all at once. So it was pretty basic. We had a Scully 8-track machine. The chief engineer at the time was Dominic Costanzo, who's still around and one of the top guys in our industry as far as technology. And I remember the day they put in a 16-track. All of a sudden, we have 16 tracks to record on. It's pretty primitive. The studio was really pretty well known as a low-end studio for Latin music. And one of the first sessions I did, I worked with an artist called Louis Ramirez, and the producer was a guy named Bobby Marin. So Bobby Marin was a producer for United Artists, and we started making records. And I just was working with all the Latin musicians in New York, which, by the way, that is what New York is: Latin music, R&B, and especially at that time. So one day, Bobby comes in and says, "You know what's really happening now? Disco." And he says, "I got an idea." So he pulls, he says, "Do you remember the song 'To Be With You' by Joe Cuba Sextet?" And I said, "Well, it's a little before my time, but I'm a record collector. Sure, I remember 1961. It was a New York hit. It was a ballad. Do you remember this song, Lenny, as a ballad? It was really doo-wop.
Is it on the same album as Bang Bang? Dun, 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 bang Bang on Tico Records, right?
You got it. You got it.
You know
yes.
what? I'll tell you why, everybody. My mother used to play it. That's how I know. Because my mother's Puerto Rican. So I remember hearing that album, but I'm saying, is that got to be the same with the front cover? They're all standing together. I can't believe it. I'm actually remembering this. As you're saying it, I'm going, it's got to be on that album. That's
exactly. Well, the lead singer.
Tico Records. Tico.
Yeah. So, Jim, you know, one day you should have Bobby come on and talk about Latin music in New York. It's an amazing thing. But what happened with us was he said, well, the lead singer from Joe Cuba Sextet, Jimmy Sabater, he's around. And we did this song in 1961. Everybody in New York, it's like a thing. Why don't we do a disco version of that song? So he called his arranger, Chico Mendoza, who is, if you know who that is, right now I think he's still the head of professor of music department in New Jersey at a college there. And Chico comes in and he says, well, we're good. Yeah, sure. Starts writing. Just to let you know how this works, back in the day, we had 16 tracks. So you have to plan this. You know, it's not like you can do 12 takes of something or you have 20 tracks of drums. So we brings in a live band. We're doing the music. They're playing. Is this really good? This is really good. All of a sudden we run out of tape. The song he wrote a 7-minute arrangement. And I'm like, take 1, okay, go again, take 2. Tape has like 30 minutes on it. We ran out of tape. Wind the tape back. Then we go on to take 1. And all the players on that they're all superstars in the Latin field, but they're all being paid to play this. Nicky Marrero was the timbal player. I don't remember everybody on it, but it was a nutty session, and we recorded that. And of course, it's disco, it's 1975. Strings, they come in, they're coming in to do it. Gretchen Studer came in and sang all the backgrounds. Jimmy came and sang his part. We pulled it together. And that was one of the first disco records of that era in the New York scene.
Can I ask you a technical question?
Yeah.
From an engineer standpoint, okay? You have 16 tracks. That means you have a whole bunch of microphones. You mic up the drums, you have your bass, and you're tracking. How many tracks were being used for your drums on your tape? Because you have a full kit, and strings and everything. So people can understand that, because you're dealing with a lot there. Having the,
Yeah, and this is how recording was done in the early 70s. The style had just changed from having a nice, big, lively sounding room. So at the time, I've been recording Latin bands, and we had what we call gobos, which were dividers keeping all the sound apart. And we had just started recording 16-track. In fact, one of the first records we made in that studio, 16-track, was Charanga 76. We did their first album. And you're smiling. Do you know who I'm talking about? Okay, so
yeah, those are no. David Mancuso made some of those songs very famous overnight. That's why I'm laughing. I know. Go ahead.
Okay, so, and once again, Disco Maniacs, we're getting to the meat of the story, but to record Charanga is a light rhythm section, 2 violins, 2 singers in unison, and a flautist, and he plays all through it. So how do you record that in a room where pretty much everything's recording? I would record them. I would put the 2 singers in the lounge because it was night. There was a little window. They were in our front lounge next to the water cooler. The flute player would play. We ran a long line into another studio. We had 2 studios to record him live and recorded all this stuff, which is very, very, it was like the style of the day was isolation. So To Be With You, stereo drums, of course. That was it. We had stereo drums. We had a bass drum in the center, snare in the center. I put mics on the side. 2 tracks for drums, bass, guitar. 2 tracks for percussionists because we had a conguero and a timbal player. And then we had a track for overdubs. I'm trying to remember. I get credit for remembering this stuff. So with the singer on, she sang, she tripled herself. We bounced that down, singer sound. So it was pretty simple. In order to mix it, it was like turn everything up, make adjustments, and record it. So the interesting thing was, I don't know if back in the day, it was so new to do a 12-inch disco version. They called me up because I'm supposed to know in the afternoon. They were at Frankfurt Wayne Mastering Labs, which was a cutting room. And this was at the beginning of the disco era. And they said, okay, well, it's 12-inch. What speed? Really? What speed? Yeah, we can do it at 45. It's going to be much louder and bigger. Or we'll do it at 33 as a 12-inch. So I said, 45. Record comes out. It sounds great. It's instantly obsolete. Nobody's playing 45 RPM, 12 inches. But if you look at the original record, it's 45 RPM. And at the time, the other engineer besides me and Dominic, his brother, the brother of the other engineer, is also named Dominic. And his name escapes me, but he was the chief engineer at Frankfurt Wayne. And he was the guy sitting there with all this stuff. Show you how primitive it was. He had a little Radio Shack 5-line fader EQ, and he would do things like turn up 10K, turn down this. It was like something you'd have in your house you bought for $75. That was mastering at the time. So the record came out good. If you listen to it today, it came out on Mary Lou Records, and it sold well. It was really well. So there I am. I did this. That was when I first met John Morales, by the way. John came in. He was hanging out. He knew all the guys, and he was advising us on how to mix the record. Amazingly enough, after that session, he immediately moved to the background. And if you know John's story, he was involved in millions of recording sessions. He would literally show up at the end, 3 a.m, to sit there. All right, let me know. Okay, you guys done? And he'd jump on the console and make a mix. That's where all his mixes came from. But at the time, he was like, yeah, could be more of this and that. The drummer for this was Mickey Sevilla, who would eventually wound up with the Savannah Band, and they were friends. And so anyway, the record comes out, and we're thinking we're hot stuff. I don't know if I can use the S word on this. We were pretty hot. And so I'm starting to realize that I could do some cool things. So I went into the office and I said, I'd like to make more records. And the owner at the time, they were making a lot of money on industrial things and things like that. And while we all loved Latin music, he didn't see a future for the studio doing a lot of music. We could make as much money per hour recording one announcer doing a commercial. So this is what you do when you're 22. You say, too bad. I'm going to open my own studio. I'm going to do all this stuff. I was night working. So I'm working 9 to 5 at the studio. At night, I would go out to a studio in Jersey City owned by a guy named Les Lido, which the studio, I don't know if it's pretty infamous. He wrote a song called Cotton Candy. He won a Grammy for it, as he wrote for Al Hurt. It was the follow-up to Java. And he's a songwriter. I can't remember the other things. He was barely 4 feet tall, crazy. He was a crazy guy. He had this little studio, and we were in there. He had what was called a 12-track 1-inch. So at night, I'd be working with these guys. He shows me in the back room. He says, maybe you should buy this console. On its side is an empty console and a pile of parts. I'm an idiot. I said, okay, great, I'll buy it. I bought the parts. I paid it off in studio time. It was Fairchild faders and stuff. And I just thought, okay, great. This will be great. I'll build a console out of it. So I literally by hand wired it, connected it up. A friend of mine and I built op amps, and we opened a loft studio in Chelsea. And I think I don't have a picture of that console, but if you put up, so anyway, there I am. We put it in this console. I have a 3-track machine. I turn it into 4-track. I start doing demos and stuff. Wind up meeting a couple of guys from that studio, musicians. They said, we'll back you if we open the studio. Now I'm living in the back of Blank Tapes Studio A in a loft building. So 8 a.m., all the people come into the loft. They're all running the sewing machines and everything. I'm waking up. I got a recording studio. So picture 13, please. So this is me. This is a little later. Behind me is our 4-track Ampex. And Lenny, you know what that means, four tracks.
Well, I wanted to know did you change the heads? Who did the head assembly to change it to a 4-track? Because that's something you can't make unless you're a genius. I'm curious to see how you did this.
At the time, you could buy 3-track machines really cheap because they were 3-track. And in order to use them, it was a very primitive cell sync, which is the way you synchronize the tracks, was a toggle switch on it, made a big pop when you used it. And there was a big business on guys who would take the assembly, you take it off, unscrew it, send it to them, and they put new heads in. So Then I had to buy a fourth electronics and put it in. Now, at the time, I considered myself fairly handy, and I did all this stuff myself. But at the time,
hang on, Bob. Check out your telephone. Look, the phone next to this with a landline phone. Everyone, no cell phones yet.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you a couple of odd things about this picture too. First of all, look at my hair. Second of all, next to me is our 2-track. That's a 2-track tape machine. See the little, if you look at it up close, there's a little knob where the heads are. And when you rewound and fast forward to the tape, you had to manually pull that open. Otherwise, you'd blow your speakers out because it was so simple that it didn't have anything to lift the tape when you rewound.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was really crazy. To the left of that is our 16-track. We had purchased a 16-track. That's a story I'll tell in a minute. On top of it, this is later in the time than in the story, but on top of it is a mono Dolby A processor. Back in the day, you would use noise reduction, and we got a job to put a singer on tape on a project and on 16 tracks. So we rented the Dolby A. So we're in there spending a lot of money every day to use that. But anyway, yeah, the console was tiny. We all worked crazy hours. So, all right. So we're there. My soon-to-be partners purchased with me a 16-track and a Steinway Grand, now a real studio. We're below 42nd Street. Still, nobody will come down legit. It was still R&B and Latin, which I loved. But your pop musicians, nobody would go below 42nd Street. They all recorded on the 10th on 10th Avenue and on the Upper West Side.
So basically, by the Brill Building, up that way.
Brill Building, yes. You would. That's where there were some studios along there. Like I said, I was at the Palace Theater at the time, which is on 47th Street. But the major studios, except for RCA, were over on 10th Avenue in the 40s. Sitting alongside these $1 million monster studios were all the Latin distributors. And you would drive up 10th Avenue, and to the right would be Tico, and all these record labels would have their distributors there. Latin music was really backseat, out of the trunk. Here's your records. Give me some money. So anyway, put in the 16-track and started going. I'll never forget the day that we were working at a band called Malo. We did Malo's album, and I'm there, and guy calls up and says, well, we're ready to come down and convert your machine to 24-track. I'm thinking, cool. So we tell the guys, there's a couple of guys that go out for lunch. Here's $20, pay for lunch. 2 days later, the machine has been converted. It's a big joke. It's like, it just everything plugs in. Well, it doesn't really work like that. So when we got to be 24-track, we were able to attract more and more intense clientele. Is everybody's brain exploded by now? Okay, so
they're all intensely listening. No. You understand something, Bob. Unless you explain this clearly, this doesn't exist to most people. They don't understand. You're doing a great job. Please keep going.
Okay. So if you put up number 3, this is the record label that followed me to my new studio. This is a pseudo gold record for Soy by Charanga 76. And we mixed it. It was on our 16-track and did the whole thing. We were so proud of this. This is my first gold record, even though, if you notice, it's not an RIAA record. Most of the record labels in the disco era did not report accurate sales. Because if you report you have $500,000 in sales, you've got to pay taxes on it.
Don't miss the rest of this wonderful interview. Search for part 2 on the internet and listen to the rest of the story.